How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the James Loud Podcast. And today, my special guest is Andrew DeAngelo. How are you doing today, Andrew?
I'm great, James. Thanks for having me into your beautiful studio.
Thank you so much for coming. So, Andrew, you have a long history with cannabis.
Yep.
You and your brother Steve founded a bunch of projects and ventures like Harborside. But you go back into cannabis even further than that, I would assume. And also, I've read some stuff about you acting years ago.
Yes. So I'm proud to say 2023 is my 40th anniversary in the cannabis trade. I started in high school. So in those days, we were underground, man. Everything was underground. And so my brother and I started working that market and did it pretty well in our hometown, Washington, D.C. And my brother had an old friend out in San Francisco named Dennis Peron. And Dennis Peron was working to legalize medical out here, first in the city of San Francisco in 92 and then statewide in 96.
Yeah.
So in those days, your listeners might not know, but there was a little split in the cannabis movement. Some of us split it over into industrial hemp because Jacques Herrera's book had just been published.
Right.
And we're like, oh, wow, we can make all this stuff out of hemp. Let's start a hemp company. So me and my brother started a hemp company. And then cats like Dennis Peron was like, no, it's medicine. Let's start the medical cannabis revolution. It turns out Dennis was right and we were wrong. But eventually, because we had a robust wholesale business underground, we were able to send Dennis a bunch of money for those initiatives. You mentioned me being an actor. I was in acting school here in San Francisco when those initiatives were happening, early 90s. And I would buy and sell cannabis to Dennis because he was basically the only dispensary in the world at that point. And he had opened up different storefronts and I remember that one of the first ones was above the transfer bar on Market Street. And it was a little gay bar, right there at the Muni stop, right in front of the Safeway there. And above, there was like this space. And Dennis rented that space and you could fit, 50 or 100 people in there, and it was always packed.
Wow.
And, they would buzz you in. In those days, you'd get buzzed in to the dispensaries. And, and everybody, Dennis, my brother and I, everybody, a lot of people in the movement, I can't say everybody, but a lot of people in the movement wanted to get legal. We were tired of getting busted. Dennis had gotten badly busted. My brother had gotten busted. I had not yet gotten busted at that point, but I have, of course, a couple arrests in my career too. And we didn't like hiding from the world. We didn't like being criminals. We didn't like getting chased by cops. And it was a really hard way to live. So once we legalized in California, my brother and I did the same thing in our hometown in Washington, D.C. 2 years later, 1998. The federal government would not allow us to implement that law. The way the District of Columbia works, the federal government funds the District of Columbia. So they would not appropriate the funds to implement the program. Well, and then a year or two after that, my brother got busted really badly. And, we knew it was time that we had to leave our hometown and come out to California. My acting career was going pretty good in the 90s, but there came a split in the road for me. There was no way that I could. Acting's more than a full-time job,
right?
And cannabis is more than a full-time job.
They're both lifestyles and
they're just brutally hard professions that require, 18-hour days being on all the time. And so I realized I was also getting, Hollywood's a very young town. I mean, once you get approaching 30, if you haven't made it yet, you have to start thinking about different ways to be a storyteller, maybe. And we had this bust and my parents were elderly. I had to take care of my family. That was the most important thing. So then we started Harborside in 2006. That was a medical dispensary. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And in those days, there were no labs, there were no investment groups, there were no packaging companies. So we started all of those as well. The ArcView Group, Steep Hill Labs, Canaline Packaging, to try to create infrastructure for the industry to use. In those days, the city of Oakland and most places in the state were barely licensing retail. They certainly weren't licensing growers and breeders. And,
Right.
you know, those folks are still getting busted,
Yeah.
you know, by the state, by the feds, all over the place. And so we wanted to build that infrastructure. We knew the day was going to come where lab testing of the cannabis was going to have to happen just to make things copacetic with the general public for a while. Well, we knew that elected officials and politicians were going to need that. So we wanted to pioneer these things. Same thing with the child-resistant packaging.
Right.
And, you know, Harborside and other of those first movers that did well, we didn't have any, couldn't raise any money. It was a nonprofit model during the medical. And, you know, you go to an investor and like, nonprofit. And they're like, bye-bye. We've got other places to put our money. But I like the nonprofit model because it really served our community well, right? Growers and breeders and traders and transporters and manufacturers. I mean, we had most of the products on Harborside's shelf in those early years came from very small businesses, people that were making stuff in their kitchen, people
boutique.
Very boutique, very craft, and it was high quality stuff. I mean, we didn't put anything on our. If you didn't, you know, 90% of what came in the purchasing door got rejected.
Yeah.
But we would also give feedback to folks so they can improve and get better because, you know, when you tell somebody no, they get a little upset. And so to say, hey, we think if you did this, that, or the other, you could improve your products to the point where we could feel good about buying them. And we'd even go to people's farms, you know, and give them pointers. We had some brilliant subject matter experts that we hired that ran that whole department. And so that was Harborside. And then, you know, the adult use framework came along a long time after that.
Right.
And that framework, of course, is much different. So it had a big impact on everybody in California.
So back in the early days of Harborside, you guys had like the boutique Walmart of cannabis. It was a wild experience. And you guys also put a lot of money back into the community. You guys had massages and you had other things that, you know, a lot of places didn't have.
Were free.
Free massages, free, you know, and free education. You know, you guys were educating people for free. But the quality of the products, I mean, you guys had really good quality flower right from the get. I can remember the Sage and Sour that you guys had was the best Sage and Sour I've ever seen. Yeah. You know, it came from a dispensary. So, and I think a lot of people think of it the opposite now where the craft stuff is all.
It's true. It's the opposite now because all those folks had to go underground. Yeah. Because they couldn't comply with the 64 framework. A lot of people tried to comply. Yeah. And failed. And then they went back underground. A lot of people, you and I know this, man, they got one foot in both markets. And that's how they've managed to survive this framework, which is really broken in California.
It's a really sad thing that we have this.
Tragic, man. Tragic.
Well, it's like the whole let's reschedule instead of deschedule. That's the whole, you know, it's unbelievable that we're even having this conversation.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, descheduling is the obvious choice for anybody on the policy spectrum, unless you're just a hardcore prohibitionist, right? And the science is there, the studies are there.
There's proof.
Yeah, there's all kinds of proof. You hear the elected officials, especially at the national level, say, "Oh, we got to study it more. We haven't studied it." Are you kidding me? What's been studied more than cannabis in the whole world? I mean, I can think of very few things that have been studied more than cannabis. Maybe petroleum. Or mining or something. But it's been a very difficult road and a lot of people couldn't make it. And folks are not going to just let their businesses die. Right. If they're able to, they're going to play in both markets. And a lot of people are doing that in California right now. Yeah.
And people are going to do whatever it takes to survive at the end of the day.
Yep. So don't get too famous. Don't come on James' show if you're doing that.
Right. Totally. All eyes on the show. But yeah, it's really interesting the uphill battle from the beginning from the early days to where it is today. And it's changed a lot. It still has a long way to go.
Yep. Long way to go.
And it's really interesting because I feel like the general consensus, if you ask people all over the United States, is more than 50% are okay with it. So
I think we're at 65% for adult and 95 for medical in the polls right now.
Well, and it's hard to argue the medical. That's the biggest thing is like, I don't get that 5% are just bad people that don't want people healthy.
Well, yes, and they have a lot of stigma, and they still feel that the getting high part is more harmful than the medicinal part.
Yeah,
and so they're just super conservative people, and you know I don't know, man. The mainstream population of the United States is pretty conservative.
Yeah,
so you know we have to do a good job policing ourselves, and whether it be how we brand our products, you know, make sure that they're not appealing to kids or they're not knocking off other mainstream products that are in the marketplace. Okay, that's a recipe for disaster for everybody. And because there's all kinds of ways to tell our stories, and you know, our stories are amazing. They're phenomenal stories. Very few people live the kind of life we do. Okay, very few people take the kind of risk we do. Very few people have the adventures we do.
The experiences, absolutely.
The experiences, right? And so it's a very rich life to live, but we that are in that bubble, we have to be mindful that it is a bubble, and the folks outside of it have a lot of concerns, man. I've been all over this country building dispensaries and grows and other things, and the local people really still have a hard time with this, in most places. And it seems absurd to us because it feels like we've just been educating for years and years and years. But we just have to stay on that and make sure that we're not just policing ourselves, but providing good, solid information. Because I don't know how you feel about it, James, but the consumer seems very confused to me right now.
I agree. I mean, the markets aren't stable. You know, for one thing, California, especially, you know, me being from California, but also I work in Washington and I go to Colorado quite often. And those markets are a little more mature than California. There's a trust with brands more so. And I feel like we need to get that trust as Californians. We need to get that trust with our consumers, you know, and I think running it like a real business is one thing, but also having good quality product so they can have a reliable source they can go to. I mean, I think those things are huge, but also just running these things like real businesses. You know, I mean, that's what's going to make the difference.
Right. You know, professionalism goes a very long way, and just being excellent, you know, is, you know, when I look at your facility here, it's been, you've cared for it. You've put a lot of effort into making it look and feel and be excellent. And as long as we do that, we're going to be okay, because the baseline in the mainstream society is not excellent. I mean, look around.
Right.
So, you know, you can count on a few hands, you know, amazing experiences. Apple stores are perhaps one of them, right? Amazing. Totally. They didn't have to do that. They're Apple to sell it. Yeah. You know,
they do anything.
But they did it. They spent, you know, tens of millions of dollars on the Apple stores. I'm lucky enough to have one of their leaders who did that in my consulting co-op. But you know, if we can create experiences that allow people to say, wow, and then when they get home and they hit the weed or they take the edible or whatever it is,
that pre-roll, and it tastes amazing and it gives you a great effect.
Wow.
You know, I love the pre-roll. So that's just my thing, is I love the pre-roll because you're not looking at the flower. You're looking at it from a taste perspective, and you're looking at it from an effect. Yes. Right. And so you can get rid of the hype to a lot of the degree. It doesn't have to look like this amazing thing. It could be the ugliest bud in the world, but if it tastes great, if it gives you a good effect, that's really what counts at the end of the day. So, and it's about the experience. So we start talking about experiences, and I love that because I feel like cannabis is such a great experience, but anymore, you used to be able to get by giving people a mediocre experience with cannabis. It had to get people high pretty much. And if you grew stuff that got people high, you were okay. Now you have to have the best shit. If you want to survive, you have to have some of the best cannabis, you know, and it doesn't matter whether you're black market or white market. If you're in rec, you have to grow the best stuff because the price is so much lower that to be in that upper echelon, you got to grow quality.
Yeah, there's always room at the top.
There's always for everything. And there's that 1% rule. As long as you fit into that 1%, you're going to be okay. And that almost transcends everything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's what I work really hard with my clients on is let's get to that level. It's going to take more time to get to that level. It's probably going to take more resources to get to that level. But when you get to that level, when headwinds occur in the market, because the supply chains are fragile, and they're being, you're building them while you're flying the airplane, right? And so sometimes airplanes crash when you're building them and
Totally.
flying them at the same time. And so those market headwinds, if you're at that top 1% and people just are loyal to your product, they might buy a little less of it during hard economic times and, supplement their purchase with something that's more value centered, but they will not abandon you ever, right? Because one of the things I've learned being a stoner, I'm sure you've learned it too, we always want to put the best cannabis in our bodies that we possibly can. We will search long and far to get something that really pops, right? And so that's and when more and more people become cannabis enthusiasts, that same dynamic's going to happen, right? They're going to want something that really pops eventually, right? Eventually, once you get on that spectrum and you go from cannabis curious to full on stoner, right?
Yeah.
Then you're like, okay, let's see what I can do with this a little bit more on the quality scale.
Right. Well, and it's just like with everything, I feel like data points, as you've experienced it more, the more times you've tried cannabis or food, you really learn more about yourself and what you like and what you don't like. And so that's kind of what's going on in California in my mind. It's like they go on Instagram or social media and they see these brands and they're like, oh yeah, that must be good because it's Snoop Dogg's or whatever. And I'm not saying anything bad about Snoop Dogg's brand, but I think people are attracted to hip hop or to things that they can relate to. So they associate, well, maybe that's good. But really, you need to try several different things, figure out what's right for you, what kind of experience you want to have, all those things.
Yeah, why wouldn't you have fun with that? I mean, certainly try the celebrity brands. See what you think. If they don't meet your expectation, you should let them know.
Yeah.
Right? Because all these celebrity brands are licensing deals, basically.
Totally.
The celebrity's not in the garden. Snoop's not actually trimming this weed.
He's probably smoking it, though.
I should hope so. I hope he's smoking it. And even if to say, go back to the drawing board, this doesn't deserve to have my name on it, which may happen. I hope happens.
For sure.
But check out the craft growers. Check out the craft cannabis because one, it's a community that deserves support,
right,
and is worthy of abundance. Mm-hmm. They carried this plant through thick and thin for 100 years, and we have to honor and respect that. And plus, they grow great weed. I mean, they create great products, and it doesn't have a bunch of fancy, flashy marketing sometimes. It may not have an in-store display. They might not be able to buy a shelf.
Right.
But dig around a little bit because it's not hard to find these products. And you can get, now there's Sun and Earth certified products that David Bronner has that program. And,
totally.
and that goes beyond organics, right? So if you really want clean cannabis, check out Sun and Earth certified cannabis, right? So we're starting to get our act together in terms of providing differentiation in the marketplace between craft and celebrity and also bigger companies, scaled companies like Glass House or something like that.
Well, and then we go into terroir.
Yes.
And that excites me too. It's like, because I see what's been done in the wine industry, and I think cannabis, we've talked about it for years, but really it's gonna happen where you're going to be able to go. And I would love to see that as a vertically integrated model where you can go to the farm, you can talk to the guy who grew it, you can hear about his parents who maybe grew it or whatever, and he can tell you the story of why it's grown and why it tastes like it tastes and how it feels. And I mean, I think that's just such a beautiful thing that, this is like the legacy that these people will be leaving to their children potentially, and also a legacy for the giants that came before us in the industry.
Yes, and we're starting to see the folks up in Humboldt and Mendo in that community diversify themselves. So you're starting to see glamping models on farms now where you can go glamp and cut weed and consume weed and be with weed. And being a beautiful place. It doesn't get much more beautiful than Humboldt or Mendo in the whole world. So we're starting to see that. I think the hospitality models are going to be big and just like wineries, right?
Yeah.
Wineries, they have two ways that they have three basic revenue streams. One is they sell wine in bulk to distributors.
Right.
The alcohol industry has this three-tiered system, right? You're either a producer, you're a distributor, or you're a retailer. You can only be one of those things.
Right.
Unless you're a producer, you can sell direct at your winery to consumers. So that's the second revenue stream they have. And then the third revenue stream is just, all the extras that come with the experience of the tasting room, or, some places do tours, some places do the glamping, some places, and it's really, some places have a little food, a little bit of snacks, and so I think what we've seen with wine tasting is an excellent model and terroir. I mean, I'm a big fan of Swami Select. Swami Select is, and he grows in Mendo. He's in Mendo, and he grows in the terroir. He actually puts his plants in the ground. They're not they're not in a pot with a bunch of soil he brings from the outside.
Totally.
He regenerates that land. He puts this, the mycelium in there, and he just creates the soil, and then it's right there. And that's the appellation. And they're close in Mendo and Humboldt to getting that done. They've been working on it for a few years now. There's a lot of constraints and issues with that program.
Totally.
But it is a lot further along now than it was 3 or 4 years ago when people were first starting to talk about it. And, one of the constraints is a lot of that land up there wouldn't pass the lab tests if you put plants directly into the land, because it's a little bit dirty, or it has heavy metals in it, or it's been farmed, or it's been logged, or it's been whatever.
Right.
So there's some work that needs to be done to remediate that, because the appellation, for me, the appellation thing doesn't work unless you're planting in the actual ground and soil of the region.
Right.
But they've done a great job. I mean, there's all these tiny little appellations. They're all next to each other. They've been named. They've been mapped for the most part.
Right.
That took years. And it's all trying to get the community, again, up there, the craft producers, to have something that differentiates themselves, right? Because a big company like my former company, now called State House or Glass House, they're all called House for some reason. I don't know why. But they don't grow that way. They can't grow that way.
Right.
They can't. They would never grow that way, and so they'll never get an appellation, designation on there. And so if the consumer starts digging this, right, just like the wine people, Bordeaux is Bordeaux.
Bordeaux is Bordeaux. Absolutely,
it can't come from anywhere else, and it's got to be Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cab Franc.
Very strict rules.
Very strict rules, right? Yeah. It served them well. To have those strict rules. And so that's how other industries, and I don't really like comparing cannabis to alcohol very often, but I do see, we're in California, we're talking about California. The wine industry is a dominant industry here. I don't know, it's got to be top 5 industries in the state. And we have to find these models, because we're building something from scratch. Never been. 100 years of prohibition is a long time, there is no muscle memory. There isn't anyone alive who was around, who could go into a drugstore in San Jose in 1910 and buy a cannabis tincture. There's just nobody that's around that could do that. So it's up to us really to pioneer all of this and protect ourselves at the same time. I mean, one of the things we've certainly seen is the colonization of California cannabis in a big way.
Right.
So, that's something that has been one of the more painful parts of the adult use framework for everybody, certainly for me and my family, but for a lot of people. And, it's been hard. So whatever advantages we can get, we should create for ourselves,
Right. Yeah, so let's talk about the Last Prisoner Project. I'm good friends with Rich DeLisi. He's been on the show. Steve's been on the show, and I'd love to get your history of Last Prisoner Project. And
well, my brother came to me one day with a vision, like he does with a lot of things. He did it with Harborside. He did it with all kinds of things in our lives. And it was a great vision. We were still in the last year or two of our Harborside journey, but we could see that things were getting very transactional in California and kind of effed up with everything. So we wanted to get back to our roots. And at Harborside, one of the free programs we had, you could write a letter to a cannabis prisoner. And in exchange for that, we'd give you a free gram of medicine. And one of my earliest memories with cannabis is visiting my older brother in prison when I was 9 years old. So we have this history and this roots with cannabis prisoners, me and my brother, and as we wanted to get back to that, we wanted to do something that transcends transactions, and we had people that were still locked up. I mean, my brother got the idea because one of our friends was locked up in Pennsylvania and called him from prison in the middle of a big investor meeting he was having. And the contrast between these investors talking about, billions of dollars worth of weed, cultivated and transported and sold. And Chuck, our friend, I think it was 16 pounds or something he was in prison for. So that contrast was like, we got to do something about this. And so Last Prisoner Project it started about 5 years ago. My brother and I, he came to me with the vision. I said, yes, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then we got to work. And what you need when you build out an organization like that is you need a great team. You need money.
Right.
And you need a really tight mission. And you also need ongoing support, right? We started LPP with our own money, but that was not sustainable given what was happening with Harborside and everything else. So we thought of different programs to fund it. We put together a team of people from our network that we loved and thought were terrific, pretty much all women.
Right.
And we got to work, and the first year, 2 was brutally hard. We almost had to fold the organization on more than one occasion.
Wow.
Then 420 happened during the pandemic, 2020.
Yeah.
And we did a fundraiser for that with Weed Maps and some other folks. It was big. A lot of people saw it. Willie Nelson. We did several fundraisers. And we introduced these programs, Roll It Up for Justice and Partners for Freedom. Roll It Up for Justice is dispensaries can sign up for that program. And the change that customers have, 50 cents, 20 cents, whatever the change is at the end of the transaction, gets donated to LPP. Doesn't cost the dispensary any money, right? Sometimes they put a little bucket by the register and the change goes in there. Sometimes it's digital on the POS system.
Right.
Dutchie is our partner with that, and they are matching dollar for dollar, or they were. I think they still are. And that exposure we had at 420 2020 and announcing those programs, and then our business development team hit the streets after that. And we started to sign people up. We didn't even have to hit the streets. People would call us up and say, how do we do it? So the industry, it was one of those ideas my brother had that everyone in the whole industry just said, yes.
Yeah.
This is a good thing.
It's easy to get. It's easy to relate to.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, let's get our people. Let's get our people out of prison, man. Weed's legal. Come on now.
Right.
So, and there's thousands of people. It's just in federal lockup. I think it's 3,000 or 2,900, something like that.
Yeah.
State lockup, a lot more than that. Right. And I talked to a young man who's served 7 years in Illinois. Illinois is legal.
Yeah.
Well, why is this guy still in prison?
Makes zero
Doesn't
sense.
make any sense. You've got some of the biggest MSOs based in Illinois, based in Chicago, and this guy's sitting in prison, for 7-8 years. And so it's a moral call. It's a moral shout out. It's a call to action. It's a moral call to action. And I'm proud to say, even during a very difficult moment, and I can't tell you that our donations haven't gone down a little bit in the last year, but all things considered, the industry's really supported LPP. And if anybody out there wants to, you just go to lastprisonerproject.org/get involved, and you can learn about the programs. Again, you can do a letter writing program, just like we had at Harborside. We've transferred that program over to LPP. That's a free way. You don't have to give any money. For your listeners who have never been locked up, when you're locked up, especially doing real time, right? Years in prison. Letters are a lifeline. They are a lifeline, okay? And it'll really help people's day, because prison is something you survive minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, week to week. It's a very hard thing to survive. So getting a letter from somebody that's encouraging you and saying, hang in there. We're out here. We're fighting for you. We're trying to get you out. Keep your head up. That is a lifeline for people that are locked up in prison. So that's how people can get involved in that. And I'm just grateful to the cannabis community for being so supportive of Last Prisoner Project.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah, it's amazing what you guys have done. I mean,
thanks.
Yeah, I'm blown away. And then
Richard was one of them.
He's one of them. Yeah, and his stories are great. You know, I just...
He was the longest serving prisoner, I think, that we got out. I think it was 36 years or something.
Over 30 years. Yeah, 32, 36.
Something like that. Yeah, and really. Michael Thompson was also a long serving prisoner, almost 30 years. I think he was 28 or 29. So, yeah.
Doing the Lord's work. So
the plant teaches us this.
For sure.
I or at least taught me that.
Yeah. The first time we met was at the Harborside Farms with Shord Brooks. I think Ed Rosenthal. I brought Ed Rosenthal to the farm to take pictures, and I got him so high. I had just got my Puffco.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's like, well, can I use it? I'm like, sure, it fits in the cup holder. And so the whole time, Ed's smoking the Puffco.
On the way down there.
Yeah. And it's That's
a 2-hour drive, man.
Yeah. And so Ed's smoking the whole time. He gets there and he's like almost comatose, good old Ed with a big smile on his face, going there to take photos. And and Shord wasn't really happy with me. So at the time, but yeah, we got some good photos in, and you guys had a beautiful farm there. So tell me about Harborside Farms, how that got started and then where it is today.
That's a great question. We've always been traders of cannabis, my brother and I. We weren't growers.
Right.
And I think it was 2012 or maybe a couple of years after that, the city of San Jose, where we had a very popular shop, changed their framework, and they required everyone to be vertically integrated.
Oh, wow.
They required everyone to be vertically integrated. So we didn't want to give up that shop. And we started trying to figure out how we can become vertically integrated. And it led us to Harborside Farms, what's now called Harborside Farms in the Salinas Valley. At that time, there was not a single cannabis farm in that entire valley. And so again, Steve and Harborside were pioneering something in a place. It's too bad we couldn't buy a bunch of farms around there and flip them to some of the bigger players that are down there now. But we were first down there, and we had to raise money. Yeah. We had to raise money. It's expensive to grow cannabis in greenhouses or indoors.
When they required you to retrofit, if I remember right, it wasn't like you could do new build outs. It had to be retrofitted.
Yeah, you couldn't do new build outs unless you
structure.
you had to get permission for that. And that was really hard to get. And we eventually were able to build a Dutch style Venlo greenhouse there.
I remember when you guys were building them, they looked awesome.
What our investors wanted to do was a little different than what we wanted to do. They were very interested in scale. And we were more oriented towards craft. Right. We thought maybe, the opportunity down there was to be almost more of a nursery, because we didn't need that much weed for our own shops that you can grow. That's a gigantic facility. Right. That was one area we diverged from our investors a little bit. And, when we got Shord down there, the farm was struggling, pretty bad. Right. Unfortunately, that little piece of land is just inside the fog belt down there. And so you have a lot of issues with PM down there. Powdery mildew, for those that don't know what PM is. And we struggled with that. I mean, we struggled with it for a little while. And that was the impetus for getting the Venlo, was you could control that a lot better. So, the farm, like all farms, the first year or two, we struggled. Then it got better. Now, Harborside Farms, is now State House. State House is a big company where several different companies, Harborside, Urban Leaf, Sublime, Loud Pack, all came together and formed a even bigger company. Yeah. By that time, we had left, Steve and I, and And now all those brands that are within Loud Pack or Sublime, or I think Dime Bag's another one they have, Harborside Farms produces all of that for those brands. And then they put those brands on the shelf of their stores now. I think we have 15 stores throughout the state now. And that's what Harborside Farms has become now. And, you know, Shord's not with us down there anymore. He definitely turned things around. I mean, he was there for a couple of years. And then he moved on to other opportunities. And
he's doing some preservation work right now with, you know, old school genetics and
I think he's at a place in his career where he can have more autonomy of what he wants to do, because he's very good at what he does as a farmer, and he gets paid very well. I can tell you that. So I think he's done well, and now he can do what he wants, you know, and good for him, man. I love Shord and his whole crew. They're wonderful people. And I know I feel very grateful and blessed that they were with us for as long as they were. Yeah.
Really good people. Yeah. I'm friends with all the guys.
Yeah. They're amazing.
So.
Yeah.
Now you guys have started out, you started in California, but you're also working in New York and all over the US. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I am a consultant. Okay. So that's how I make a living. LPP, Last Prison Project, is a volunteer job. And Harborside doesn't pay me anymore. So that's how I make a living. And, you know, I have a passion for building things. I love building. You know, I noticed you've just built something here, right? And it's really fun to build things and then to see them come to life. And to see the ideas and visions leap off of paper into reality. Yeah. And then, you know, it's even more fun when you're right. And you're like, okay, we planned that correctly. We don't have to redo anything. We can just practice our craft, right? So that's what I love to do. I'm mainly known for dispensary build outs and consulting for people to get dispensaries, but I like to be there as close to the beginning when the entrepreneur decides to either start up a dispensary or fix the one they have. Yeah. I do both of those things. We've consulted with grows and manufacturers too. I have a co-op model, so I've got folks like that in the co-op. I even have industrial hemp. So I want to build a lot of industrial hemp models that transcend cannabinoids that are food and fiber based, and hempcrete and things like that. I think there's a big future in that.
Huge. Yeah. I mean, we're going that direction.
Yeah.
So it's just an obvious direction to go. And I mean, the cost benefit for one thing is huge. But also it's better for the environment. And, you know, obviously we love cannabis and we love the plant.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely better for the environment. And you know, that's kind of a big deal right now. So I'm excited about that. So, you know, entrepreneurs that want to get a hold of me for help, just reach out to andrewdeangelo.com. Yeah. There's all kinds of buttons on there that'll get you an email to me. And, you know, it's a real passion I have. What I like about consulting is, unlike Harborside, where I had to build just one thing, right? You know, I can build, like you said, across the country and the world. I got clients in Europe too.
Amazing.
So, you know, it's no doubt a difficult year, okay, for everybody, including consultants. But that's what I love about it, is that, you know, it gives me an opportunity to take everything I've done and just build the industry, you know, throughout the country and throughout the world. It's enormously satisfying when you work on something as a consultant and the clients, not only are expectations met, but expectations are exceeded. And that's when it feels really good, because I go in and out of jobs. You know, I get hired for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, and then the entrepreneurs run their own businesses, right? That's what they love to do. And so I'm having a real good time with that. And yes, trying to build some things in New York right now. It's a really difficult moment in New York. They have all kinds of litigation and licensing problems.
It's wild. Yeah, over there. It's sad to a degree. Yeah. I mean, the whole dispensary model that they've set up, it's, you know, and they've got all these black market shops.
Oh my God. Hundreds of them. Hundreds and hundreds of them. So
which is much different than we, that we experience in California. But
well, you saw that in LA a bit.
For sure.
A bit. And we, I remember dealing with Measure Z clubs. Measure Z is this thing in Oakland where the police have to treat cannabis as the lowest priority.
Yeah.
It was called Measure Z. And I don't know, it was almost 15 or 20 years ago that got passed. And so all these Measure Z dispensaries opened.
Yeah.
And it was hard because they don't lab test their medicine. They don't do anything with the packaging. And it was hard to compete with them. And I remember struggling with that a little bit. So it's not as dramatic here in California, outside of LA, really, as it has been in New York. But New York's just one of these places. If the city of New York does not like a vacuum, it doesn't matter what the product is, doesn't matter what it is. If there's a vacuum and people can make money in New York on it, they're going to fill it.
Yeah. And
the regulators just didn't even come close to understanding that dynamic. Mm-hmm. And now they have to enforce. And maybe it'll be a little easier to enforce against a storefront than a delivery service or something like that's less centralized. Right. But it's still going to be hard, man, because they go in, they red tag it, then they have to come back. There's a hearing, then you come back again. There's like several steps before you can like shut it down.
Right.
And of course, the owners of those shops are suing.
Of course.
Of course, they're suing. They're like, "What do you mean? You made it legal?" It's just such a mess in New York.
Wild.
I thought California was the poster child for how not to legalize weed, but New York's definitely a run for the money. We should have a flag, New York and California right next to each other on the flag. And it's easy to joke about it, but these are human beings that are suffering at the end of this. On the tip of the spear is somebody whose ass is getting cut. And it's just, I work on public policy. It's not something I like to do because I'm frustrated because nobody listens to us. The elected officials, the boards, they don't listen to us at all. I mean, I was in who is now the director of cannabis control in California. I was in her office, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe? Or maybe it was a little more than that, like 2018, right when we were about to flip.
Yeah.
And I whiteboarded her. And I was like, I put a big line in the middle of the whiteboard and I wrote lab test on it. And I was like, and then I put an arrow pointing below that line and an arrow pointing up. Below that line, you don't need any regulation. Mm-hmm. What do you need regulation for? The lab's going to catch any nasties. Regulate the labs.
Absolutely.
Okay, regulate the labs. We've had a big problem with that because now, the labs have been doing some, shady things with pumping up potency results and shopping their results around. And,
and there's no consistency at all.
There's no protocols. The labs don't have a specific SOP that they all have to follow. Like if there's an outbreak of bad beef, if you tried to lab test every pound of ground beef that Americans consume,
you go broke.
And you'd starve. Okay. So they can't do that. Mm-hmm. There's too much beef going through the pipeline. You cannot spend a day or 2 or 3 lab testing all that beef. Right. So unless they don't do anything, unless there's an outbreak. Now, once there's an outbreak, then they do the recall, and they have they know where the beef came from, right? They have that in the regs.
Yeah.
And so they can trace it all the way back to the producer, and then they lock down that producer and try to figure out the problem. Okay, E. coli or anything, right? And they recall all the product so nobody gets sick.
Totally.
You could do that with us.
Yeah.
You could totally do that with us, right? Yeah. I think maybe it takes a little while to get there, because it's still such a money grab right now that people will be not as honest, right? But if she would have listened to me more, right, the framework would be much different, right? And and we would be able to compete and create one market instead of dual markets,
Yeah.
right? We almost have 3 markets now with the hemp derived. And it's like, how many markets can we have before our knees give up, and it just falls, it just collapses.
Right.
I mean, so my vision is to get all this into one market. The only way to do that is with good public policy. And it's very hard to do after you've screwed it up, like New York and California.
Yeah.
Right. If California would have just licensed people that were already in the supply chain, and made it pretty easy for them, and made the lab test more intense, made the lab test the thing, right, that you had to work towards, we would have a lot closer to one market. It doesn't mean you wouldn't have, quote unquote, bad criminal elements growing up in the forest and selling it back east or whatever. You probably would have that. But law enforcement would be able to be focused on them, right? They wouldn't be worried about Swami. They wouldn't be worried about, and the same thing with the regulators. They would have been focused on the labs, right? And
now we're working backwards.
Now we have to fix it. And it's hard to do because you can't get consensus, even from our own industry. It's very fragmented. And so what I hope for California is, and I haven't been able to make this happen, but I've been talking about it since 2018, 2019. I want a new ballot initiative. Yeah. I want a new ballot initiative, man. Because if we would have had a new ballot initiative in 2020, when turnout was so high in that election, we would have won.
We may want to wait till Gavin Newsom's out of office after this last debacle.
Yeah, probably. Yes. Yeah. You're mentioning his vetoes. Yes. Of the psychedelic bill and the cannabis cafe bill.
Really sad. Really sad. Especially the cannabis cafe. It's psychedelics too. I mean, I think, I like psychedelics. I feel like they should be legal. I feel like they do more good than they do bad.
Yeah.
And the cafes are going to support small business. So how can you go against something that would support small business? And
he was being a politician, man. He's probably running for higher office. And I think you're right. Maybe we wait till he's gone. You always have to worry about someone worse than him. But, I'm with you. I feel very betrayed by Gavin Newsom. The cannabis cafe bill, the reason he cited for vetoing it didn't make any sense. Totally. He said, I'm worried about smoke in the workplace. Yeah. Are you kidding me, man? Everything's vaporized, pretty much. Even dab bars are vapor. Okay. Right. And the only way any local person is going to let you do combustion is if you have a courtyard. Yeah. Right. If you have a courtyard and people are doing combustion, there's no threat. And we know from science that secondhand cannabis smoke doesn't hurt anybody. Right. Okay. So it was a lame excuse. It was a terrible decision because that will invigorate the entrepreneurial spirit here in California. Yeah. We already have all these chefs doing these infused dinners. We already have these tour buses going around. We already have this hospitality thing is emerging without any support from public policy. You give us a cannabis cafe bill, right? And we can sort of come out of the shadows with that whole thing. And, California is about food. Okay. It's about food. It's about producing food. It's about gourmet food. It's about organic food. It's about vegetables. It's about all of that. And pairing food with cannabis is as ancient as humanity. I mean, I think we ate cannabis as one of the very early things we ate, seed. Right. It's super nutritious. I mean, this is enough seed protein to feed a family for a long time. Right. And cannabis and food have a great future in California. The guy who ran that bill's Hanley is his name. He's a assembly person, I think, from San Francisco. So he's going to take another run at it. They'll probably put some stuff in there to protect workers from smoke, which will probably, what you always worry about with these bills is they write it in such a way that no one can make money. Yeah. Right. And so if you write the cannabis cafe bill in such a way that nobody can make money, well, no one's going to open a cafe. Exactly. And then, the people who don't want to see this happen will be very happy about that. And, they're all up there lobbying in Sacramento, and who knows what the restaurant lobby did? Who knows what the alcohol lobby did?
So much stuff goes and happens behind closed doors that we don't ever hear about.
Oh, yeah. Almost.
It's just how a lot of it works.
Anywhere, but particularly
Anywhere.
in Sacramento. I mean, it is
anywhere and everywhere, but yeah, particularly in Sacramento.
It's so corrupt. It really is. I mean, you know, our political system is pay to play, unfortunately. And I think a little of that is probably inevitable in a democracy because money is speech to a certain degree, but it's out of control. It's gone too far, you know, with handcuffing everybody in the supply chain, all these entrepreneurs. I mean, there's some brilliant, wonderful entrepreneurs, you know, in California that are still trying to make all this work, you know, and a lot of us were looking at that Cannabis Cafe bill and we're like, okay, if this passes, I'm back in.
Right.
I'm back in. I'm not going to be a consultant helping people outside of California build their thing. I'm going to come home and build my thing here.
Right.
And isn't that what we want in California as Californians? Don't we want? Right now, most of the industry is owned by people who don't even live in California.
Yeah. Or the United States in some cases.
In some cases. I mean, I know, I won't name names, but I know of a big company in California, one of the biggest. Their CEO commutes from the East Coast to California. Yeah. Doesn't even live here. And he's the CEO. When we owned and operated Harborside, I lived 3 blocks down the road from the shop. Right. I mean, I had to be able to get there like that. The alarm goes off, whatever. I had to be able to get there, man. And you know, my style of leading people is to embed with them. Yeah. It's not like in an ivory tower, you know, sending memos down, which unfortunately is what we've seen a lot of. And I want the California industry to benefit Californians. Right. It doesn't mean we're not going to have people from outside of California. Yes, they're here and they're welcome. And but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Right. Okay. And I hope that we can get a little bit better. I mean, to his credit, Gavin Newsom did veto that packaging labeling bill that was terrible. Right. Absolutely. So that was one good thing. And that was a big effort by the industry. He probably signed the petition. I signed the petition. And, you know, that would have been a disaster. Okay. Because people like Swami would have had to rebrand. Totally. You know, rebrand. His face is on there. You're not allowed to have a face in that bill. So we got that done. And, you know, like with all these things in California public policy, you get like 1/4 of a victory and 2 defeats. Yeah. And then, okay, next year, maybe we'll get another quarter. And you know, you do the math after 10 years, you get a little farther ahead. Yeah. But it takes 10 years. We're 5 years into the program now. Yeah. Okay. And Gavin Newsom's big line when we passed it was, it's going to take 5 years. It's going to take 5 years to work all this out. Well, year 5. Year 5, dude. And, you know, what are you doing except vetoing bills that'll help? Other than the labeling bill, which you know, again, give credit where credit is due, but it's, you know, and here in California you have a super majority, right? The Democratic Party is the one to blame. Now, I'm certainly not a Republican, but I'm not a Democrat either. I'm registered as an independent, and what they've done, I'm really, really angry with the Democratic Party here in California, because they've really, really messed this up and continue to. And then, you know, spike the ball in the end zone publicly and say, we're great and we're not great. Yeah. You know, so. Well, I'm registered as a Republican, but I'm very moderate in my views. And, you know, my mother's the same way. Parents are the same way. They live in Texas. Okay. But I feel like I'm more of a Democrat, dude. I'm more of an independent. I would say I'm more of an independent than anything now with the times. But it's really sad what's going on in the world where we all used to just get along. And now it's like, well, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat. And it's such a weird thing to me because I feel like there's one party doesn't have all the answers. It's not like that. And one person doesn't have all the answers. Yeah. You know, we got to pick and choose what makes sense. And all these things are subjective to our experiences. The whole debate about, the biggest thing that drives me is abortions. I don't even want to talk about that. I feel like it was, we set this stuff up in the 70s. We ended it there and now we're bringing it back up and it bothers me.
You know?
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff really bothers me about the Republican Party.
Well, I mean, there's things that bother me about both parties, of course.
Absolutely.
I mean, but one of the things I'm pretty good at is working with all kinds of different people. I mean, most of my clients are conservative Republicans.
Right.
Most all of them are. But we have a great time together and we build things together because we keep our eye on the prize, right? And the prize is we're building a business together.
Right.
And, you know, and we're taking a lot of risk and we're spending money. And, you know, those things are far more important than, you know, who I voted for, who they voted for, you know, or, you know, what we might feel about some other issue that's not cannabis, right? The thing about cannabis that I love is it brings all kinds of people together.
Yeah.
And you can be pretty conservative and you can be pretty progressive. And those two people can share cannabis together and share a mission and values with their businesses together and do very well together, you know? And it used to be like that. You know, it used to be rude to talk about politics at the dinner table. It used to be rude to tell people who you voted for.
Yeah.
Those were things when I was growing up, you weren't supposed to share those things.
You never asked somebody who they voted for.
Yeah, it was considered very rude to do that. Well, nowadays, you don't even have to ask somebody, you know? And with social media and everything, it's been amplified, right? All this division and tribalism and partisanship has really been amplified. I'm hoping that weed and psychedelics will get people off of that and sort of break that loop because that's what did it for me. You know, that's what did it for me. The reason I can get along with anybody is because I learned how to do that from these plants.
Well, you came up with the concept that I love, Cali Sober.
Yeah.
And that is just an amazing concept. And, you know, you want to share a little bit about Cali Sober with everybody? Because I think it's such a great thing. Well,
Cali Sober is a term I did not coin, but it is a lifestyle that I practice.
Yeah.
And we have an addiction crisis happening in the country. We have an opioid epidemic. We have over 100,000 people dying every year from opioids and other hard drugs and fentanyl and all the rest of it. So Cali Sober is a version of sobriety that includes cannabis and psychedelics, but generally does not include alcohol and hard drugs. That's a very broad statement. There are some people who will call themselves Cali Sober that like to drink half a glass of wine every night or once a week or something.
But it's not focused on alcohol.
Right. It's focused on cannabis and psychedelics. And that's how I've managed my relationship with psychoactive substances. When you're in the underground or in this industry, or you're a high-powered exec at Silicon Valley, a lot of those folks are addicted. Yeah. Right. And a lot of our community has issues with this because we self-medicate.
Right.
Because it's a hard life. It's a stressful life. Yeah. And people self-medicate. And I saw this all through my career, you know, and generally when our community gets strung out, people get busted.
Yeah.
They go to prison. They bring down other people with them, or their businesses fail if they don't get busted because they spend all their money on drugs or alcohol or they just can't maintain, right? And whereas Cali Sober is a lot of folks, you go to AA, right, the 12-step program, and if you say that you take weed to cope, they won't allow, most AA groups will not allow you to continue in the group, right? And so a lot of people feel alienated by that.
But you can smoke cigarettes.
You can smoke cigarettes, weird part. And they're always coffee, and you know, these are also psychoactives. And there are circles of sobriety support groups in the country now. I know of one I think it's called the Sober Stoner, but she's out of Texas, and she gathers people that are in recovery and they smoke weed together and they talk about how to stay sober and not indulge in the things that cause them a lot of problems in their lives. And so I think it's sort of it's very controversial, Cali sober, because why is the word sober in there? Because when I talked to David Crosby right before he died, about 6 months before he died, he's Cali sober.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't like Cali sober. Why don't you just call it Cali stoner? And
of course,
he felt that people that are really strung out, a lot of them need to be sober for a little while before they can reintroduce something like cannabis into their routine. And I respected that viewpoint. You know, I respect that viewpoint, but I also know a lot of folks who take cannabis and psychedelics, and might be just microdosing psychedelics.
Sure.
And it helps them stay sober, right? And so when I got turned on to this idea, I started to write about it in Forbes and a few other places, and I started to talk about it and get people sort of conversing about this, because AA and 12-step programs have not a very good track record. I think it's something like 20 to 40% success rate.
Yeah.
That's hard. And if we can increase the success rate from 40 to 80%, because we create a methodology that includes cannabis and psychedelics, while also keeping an eye to make sure that those folks don't start abusing cannabis and psychedelics, right?
Yeah.
People can have cannabis use disorders. People can have ketamine use disorders. I've seen it all over the place, right? Ketamine use disorders kind of growing right now because people have access to it. And ketamine is an easier compound to navigate, you know, than psilocybin. So, and it's a pain reliever, and it also, you know, gets your mind out of the default mode network and into something that could be a little more positive. And, but people get in trouble with it, you know.
Sure.
People get in trouble with it. I know quite a few folks that have gotten in trouble with it, and so Cali sober is not something for everybody, and it works really great for a lot of people. My brother, me, this is how we've made it work for our lives, you know.
Well, it's a beautiful thing, and I think my takeaway is that cannabis and psychedelics, they tune you in, whereas a lot of these other drugs tune you out. So that's the beauty of it, is you get tuned into the world. And so when I think of sober, I think of being tuned into the world. I feel like you might have to face some hard reality and some hard truths on psychedelics, you know, about yourself, about other things, and they'll bring things to light that can be scary and can be these other things, but they tune you in, whereas alcohol definitely numbs you. You know, and these other things, they numb you from reality, whereas cannabis, in my experience, brings you back into reality.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, you know, and so, you know, for people that might want to try Cali sober, check it out, read my articles, and, you know, learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd seen some stuff on social media, and I've read a bunch of stuff on it. I had no idea you weren't the one, but you've been a big advocate for it.
Yeah, so. I'm an advocate. The term has been around for a little while now. And there's, like all of these terminologies that we have and share with each other, there's more than one origin story.
Absolutely.
Of who coined the term. But you've seen like Demi Lovato, and you've seen Willie Nelson and Billy Strings wrote a song called Cali Sober recently.
Right.
So it's starting to sort of be talked about in pop culture in various different ways, and, you know, just getting the message out. Yeah,
Billy Strings is amazing. So he's played a lot this year. 2023 has been a big year for Billy Strings.
He is a talented
man, and he's just been on the road. Like, it's
a talented young man. How old is he? Like 28?
He's 30 something, maybe.
Okay.
Or 28. Yeah, he's super young.
Talented. Woo. Man, he can play.
Yeah, and I guess he played guitar with his father growing up. And
you can tell.
Yeah.
He's been with that instrument a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's great to see the young, some of the people coming up these days. He reminds me of Jerry Garcia in a way, because Garcia was very into bluegrass and the banjo and stuff like that. And
fast picking.
All
that stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And Billy's good at that. So it you know, it's wonderful how the music just keeps going even when from generation to generation.
For sure.
And there's so many talented people in our country right now. It's really remarkable.
So my prediction for Dead and Company is that I hope Bobby never retires. But if he does, I would love Billy Strings to jump in there. Billy Strings and John Mayer. You know, John Mayer's grown on me quite a bit because I was very anti John Mayer in 2018.
Yeah.
And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is there, 2015, I guess, originally.
Yeah.
But he's grown on me quite a bit. And, you know, I saw them in San Francisco. You were there at the show too.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, I gave Steve a joint at that show, and that's how I connected with Steve to get him on the podcast.
With Firstmont. Yeah.
Yeah, with Firstmont.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that was a great show.
Yeah. That was
Saturday night.
Oh, man. And Saturday I was a little rowdy. So I was 20 feet from the stage, and it was a little bit rowdy. And the band kind of got everyone calm, which was great. But yeah, good experiences. I mean, these life experiences, we're just so blessed to be alive right now. And it's just, you know, I smile every day. Getting up, I get to smile every day, and I'm happy. But we just get to experience these amazing things, you know, and there's so many different things that we all get to experience.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Wolf Brothers yet, but I think that's the next thing I want to see.
They're amazing. Yeah, I went all the nights when they played in San Francisco. And took different friends every night, and so
and Billy, I haven't seen Billy and the Kids yet either.
Well, they had Billy Strings at Red Rocks. I didn't get to go see it, but I've seen the videos, and you know they played So Many Roads, which is one of my favorite songs.
Yeah,
about Jerry and about addiction, and you know I totally relate to that song. And you know, hearing Billy Strings, it wasn't perfect, but Jerry's playing wasn't perfect either. It was just a beautiful thing. But
look, man, the mistakes are part of the sound. You know, when you are an improviser.
And that's almost the best part, where it's not perfect and flawless, where it almost falls apart, but right before you think it's going to fall apart, Jerry would pull it back together.
Yeah, somebody would pull it back together.
Or somebody would pull it back together, or it would get,
I've seen Mayer do that too, you know? And I agree with you. At first I was like, oh man, with John Mayer. But
he's really vibing with the band though. And him and Bobby back and forth, and, you know, and everybody.
Yeah. So, and I think he approached the community and the opportunity with a lot of respect and reverence. I thought that was really smart of him. He knew it was his participation.
He was going to get hated on for sure.
He was going to get hated on for sure, but he
still does.
He just kept being respectful and reverent of, you know, the Grateful Dead legacy. And, you know, I was sad to hear that they're going to stop touring, but I'm sure they'll play some special events.
Well, you heard about the Sphere in Vegas. They're going to be playing the Sphere, and that's
your prediction.
Well, I'm pretty sure that was an announcement. I'm not sure if they've sold tickets for it yet, but yeah.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That'd be super cool. Yeah. I mean, I love everything. I love good music just in general. So it doesn't matter what
at the Sphere would work pretty darn good. Yeah. I saw the
$5,000 tickets, but you know, I don't know, but
I know.
It's wild.
I know. The U2 shows looked pretty spectacular though.
Yeah. Totally.
So they spent like $2 billion on that venue.
It's so wild. Yeah. It's so futuristic.
Man, I guess you'll get your money back eventually.
But that's
a lot of concerts, man.
Yeah.
To get your money back.
Next 20 years, something like that.
I don't know, something.
Maybe sooner. I mean, selling $5,000 tickets, you probably get them back a lot quicker.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
With your career and all the things that you've done, if you were to look back and talk to yourself, the younger version of yourself that had just been in the industry for 2 years, what is the one piece of advice that you would give yourself?
Keep more of the money I made.
That seems to be reoccurring with people that I ask, but yeah.
We took pretty much all of our profits and we put it back into legalization and activism.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had an industrial hemp company in the 90s. I mean, all these different ventures, Arcview, Cannaline, all came from basically our own pocketbooks. And so, yes, I not because I'm greedy, but because money is a tool. And when you don't have much of it, it's hard to build amazing things, right? And it's hard to do amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to do epic things. So, and you know, me and my brother really love doing epic things. And so there's been quite a few times where we had vision or we had idea, particularly since the Prop 64 happened.
Yeah.
Didn't have the money, man. and couldn't really go get it because there's just really very little money in the ecosystem of cannabis right now. Unless you're a big MSO or RO, it's really hard to get any kind of investors in. So it's just a very constrained environment to raise money in right now. And so, you know, if we had kept more of our own, then, you know, these peaks and valleys would be a little easier to navigate. And I think we could and would and will just keep building the industry and building, you know, Steve's pivoted to psychedelics a little bit. He's got RIV retreats in Jamaica. Totally. And, you know, that's an amazing thing that he built, you know, and we want to build more stuff like that, you know, but we are resource constrained at the moment, like most people in the industry. So that would be what I would tell my younger self. When you've been on this journey, year 40 for me, you've been on this journey. All of us been on this journey a long time. You sacrifice a lot.
Right.
There's just a lot of sacrifices that one has to do, either to stay safe or to stay free or to take care of the people you love or take care of the plant or get people out of prison. These are all things that are super risky things to do and require. The only way you make epic things happen really is with sacrifice. You know, you built this facility here and you woke up every day and came in here and did it, right? That's a sacrifice. It's going to pay off for you, but it was a sacrifice, right? And you string enough of those projects together and, you know, you realize you're carrying a lot of, you've got this big backpack of, you know, sacrifices that you're carrying around. And the sacrifices, they don't cause me a whole lot of regret, James, you know? But when I look at the lives of people like me and my brother have been doing this so long, or, you know, any of the pioneers, everybody is worthy of abundance and everybody is worthy of respect and everybody is worthy of participating in building this. Yeah. So that I try to keep my eye on that as much as I can, continue to create abundant models so that just like you're going to do here, so that we can take care of more people, right? More of our people, more of our community and more of the world. I mean, we're on a mission to bring this plant medicine to the people. The people need it. The world needs it. There's, I don't know, 15 wars happening on the planet right now or something like that. And the planet itself is sort of dying under our feet. Under our watch. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of healing needs to occur. And everybody on this planet is going to have to make sacrifices like we had to make for many, many years. They might be different. They may be in different spheres of society or different areas of business or different areas of nonprofit work or whatever it is. Everybody's going to have to make some sacrifices. Yeah. You know, my partner, Samantha, she lived on Maui for 10 years. Well, a bunch of people she knows and loves, their houses burned down during the fires on Maui. And, you know, huge sacrifices, right? Huge sacrifices. And all those folks are having to scatter and rebuild and figure it out. These plants, these medicines can, you know, greatly help us with all of that and help us deal with these traumas that are probably somewhat inevitable given the 8 ball we're behind on the climate. And not to mention, you know, the political divisions in society. So the plants are on the way. That's the good news, right? We've been carrying the plants. We've been, you know, plants don't have feet. They don't have hands. They don't have mouths. They can't talk about themselves. So that's our job, right? Move it around, grow it, package it, tell the story of it, educate folks about it. Then eventually the plants do most of the work for us. Right. You know, it's been my experience. Most of the work for us. Yeah. 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 If you listen, the plant will show you the way. if you listen, right? And that's not just true with plants, but we kind of have listening is super important.
Yeah.
Just being a good listener. I mean, all you entrepreneurs out there, you want to really be successful, listen.
Yeah.
Become a good listener. It's Richard Branson talks a lot about that, and other folks, because it's how you get information, and information is how you make good decisions.
Yeah.
And so being a good listener with plants and with people and with your teams and with your investors and everybody else is a critical skill right now.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying that money's value is in its use and not in its possession. And I feel like you have lived that example extremely well. And
that's a great saying.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so many things that are tied into that too, but
everything's a tool.
Yeah.
Our bodies, our voices, our money, all these things are tools, right? For us, money probably is the one we're most familiar with, because when you have some, it's easy to take it and, do something with it. But all these other things are also tools, you know, and what we're trying, peace and love, man. It comes down to peace and love. And those are the two things that the world needs the most. I mean, Well, they transcend language. They transcend everything. Peace and love at the end of the day. Yeah. And all the religions and all the traditions talk about this. This is not just a hippy dippy thing.
Absolutely.
This is,
And peace doesn't mean a comfortable life. I think a lot of people get that wrong. Peace doesn't always mean a comfortable life.
No.
Living in peace, but mental, there is mental peace and mental freedom that's important.
Oh, but, there are yogis in India who possess nothing.
Yeah.
And they have a very peaceful mind and a very peaceful life.
Yeah.
You don't have to possess stuff.
Right.
To be peaceful. It's all within us, not easy.
But comfort and peace are two different things. And
That's
I think the struggles that we go through are what define us. And struggle is something that I think a lot of people steer away from and they're scared of, when actually struggle is something you should learn to. I do cold plunging too. So now it's like I'm embracing the cold water, and I love that. And it's really, the cold water has taught me a lot. I read about Wim Hof for years and all these other things. Until you really do it, you don't understand what the cold water can actually teach you. But it teaches you to go head on into the water and, not be afraid.
How long do you stay in there?
So the funny thing is, I'm doing some of these 15-minute plunges now, which you read stuff and it's like, well, you only need 3 to 5 minutes. And I was doing that for a long time, and I built it up. I don't always feel good when I come out 15 minutes. Sometimes I do 7 minutes. Sometimes I do 10.
Yeah.
But now that I do these longer ones, when I do 7, it feels like it's not enough. But I get the same. Yeah. I don't drink a lot of coffee typically. Sometimes before I do a show, I'll, drink some coffee to get all in the mood. But it's funny because with the cold plunge, I feel like I get that same experience. I'm awake and I'm really present in reality. And, I feel like my brain functions better. So,
I've been I don't have the tub with the ice, but I've been doing different types of cold plunges, but it's more like 60 seconds.
Yeah.
So I'll have to work my way up to.
I started out with a little bit longer than that, but I think I started out with 2. And the first time I did it was about a minute. And then I did 3 minutes the next time. And then what you realize is like these things that you think are going to kill you, because right before you get in freezing cold water, you think it's going to kill you.
Right. And your subconscious is you're not doing this.
Yeah. And so over time, and I do it daily now, and there's some arguments for how often you should do it. And I feel like you just need to listen to your body and do what's right for you.
Yeah.
And some days I feel like only going 7 minutes, and some day I'm like, I want to do 15 minutes. And I do it on an empty stomach. First thing, I get out of bed and I go into the water. It's got to be below 55 degrees is the ideal for the cold chalk proteins.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing. And I think everybody should try it and force themselves.
Tony Robbins method.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Go straight into the fire.
Yeah. No, and decision making. So you decide first thing to do something that's naturally uncomfortable for you.
Totally.
And so all the other uncomfortable things that happen throughout the day become a lot easier. And because our subconscious, I'm dealing with this a lot right now, our subconscious wants us to stay the same and be comfortable.
Right.
It doesn't want us to really change a whole lot, especially if, you figured out how to be somewhat comfortable, right? Your body and your subconscious, like, You're good, man. Stay right here. That's it. Oh no, you're gonna try a cold plunge? No, don't do that. You don't feel it. You don't. All these things come in your mind, right? And and your subconscious wants you to not do the plunge,
right?
But so you have to have a lot of conscious effort, right, to make that decision and do that. I know that right before I do mine, and I usually do it after my morning workout. So, I stand on the edge of the water for a good 60, 90 seconds before I can make the decision to go in there. And it's like your body's, it's a trip what your subconscious mind does when you're like right there on the edge of the water. Yeah. Do you do it for pain relief or you just do it for mental or?
Well, so I have ulcerative colitis and it's in remission right now.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that put it in remission, I believe, is the cold plunges.
Okay.
And so I was on biologics. I was on this drug called Remicade, and I got completely off Remicade, and I was doing cold plunges. And then my doctor's like, "You should think about going back on Remicade." And I said, "Well, I'm not having any problems right now, so I'm just going to wait another month." And another month turned into another month, and it turned into another month, and now I'm completely off. And
that's great.
It's like, yeah, I changed my diet. I don't drink beer. If I drink alcohol, it's going to be like a gin and tonic, but I don't drink a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the big thing is like noticeable changes in lifestyle. But the cold plunge, I think it makes you really aware of where you are in that moment. And I see a lot of, Tony Robbins, we've got David Goggins, right?
Yeah.
One of their biggest things is they talking about doing stuff you don't feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I mean, those are, we want to be comfortable. Our subconscious, like you're saying, really wants us to be comfortable. Yeah. And I think a lot of people try to veer away from anything that's outside their comfort zone when really we should be going head on towards it.
Yeah. And I found that getting help works with that a lot. Like for example, I hired a personal trainer.
Yeah.
Because now I'm in my 50s. And now that I'm going once a week to the trainer and he's giving me all these exercises to do on my own, I'm getting in pretty darn good physical shape.
Yeah.
And it feels really good. Now, I would not be as far along had I not hired the trainer because I learned exercises I didn't know before. And, before that, I'd lift a little weight. I'd go on a stationary bike. I'd go on a long hike, but I wasn't pushing myself to the edge, which the trainer does.
Right.
And the trainer also gives you a homework. And if you don't do the homework, you're going to be in a world of hurt.
And he's going to know it too. It's really
you're going to be in a world of hurt. He's going to put you through the workout and you're going to barely be able to finish it, right? So you're incentivized to keep going because you have to answer to somebody.
Right.
And I found, and whether that's getting a coach like Tony Robbins or, other people really help us transcend these plateaus that we may find ourselves in life, and again, it's not to shamelessly plug my consulting business, but that's what people like us do, right? Is we're here to help. And it's hard to reach out for help. The ego and the subconscious, you don't need any help. You got this. You're fine. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about something as complex as starting a cannabis dispensary in New York, I'm seeing a lot of folks in New York just making really page one mistakes, whether it be what they're calling themselves, whether it be, what kind of space they rent, whether it be the deal they have with the landlord, whether it be, and all kinds of things, I'm seeing.
Well, you're going to save people money. And that's the big, I think a lot of people don't understand is with consultants, they save you money. A lot of times you can hire someone that can navigate, that knows where you're going. So you don't have to go all over the place. You can go in a straight line from where you are now to where you want to be. And that's the base, and do it efficiently.
Fast. Okay. Because
and you have to do it fast.
You have to do it fast these days, right? Because every day that you're not bringing revenue in is a bad day.
Yeah.
Okay, it is, because you have to spend money every day to be a license holder in any framework. You have to spend money every single day. So there's thousands of dollars going out every day.
And every day there's new competition coming online, so that market share gets smaller and smaller. It's just
So you have to be good. Okay. And yes, consultants, especially some of us that have been doing this for a long time, we're not cheap.
Right. The good ones aren't cheap. The good ones are not cheap.
No, but I'm not super expensive. So like, you know, I like to think of myself as the best, but I generally fall in the middle of pricing in the market. You know, I'm not way out here like some of the law firms and other people are, but I'm not way down, you know, where someone who doesn't have the track record I do might price themselves. Right.
Right.
So, you know, and that middle place where I'm at, it gives people excellence and expertise at a rate that will save them money. Yeah. I'll give you an example. In Ohio, it's a medical framework there, and they just issued a bunch of new licenses. My clients got 3 of them, and the state board of pharmacy runs the program in Ohio. They only give you 9 months from the time you're awarded the license to opening your doors for a dispensary. Wow. That's very hard to do, especially if the buildings that are available to you in zoning are not very good buildings.
Right.
So we had to take 2 of our 3 buildings down to the stud. Oh. And then build it out from there. And we still, because those clients hired me, okay, and my team, they opened on time, okay? Something like 60 or 70% of the other license holders in Ohio did not open on time. A good 20 or 30 of them are still not open. All right. And I feel bad because, like, if you hired me, I would have had you open by now, man. And it's like, you know, and a month goes by that you're not open. Yeah. Oh my God, that could be $1 million right there that you didn't get in revenue.
That would have more than paid for your consulting service.
Many times over. And so, you know, these are the kind of things that happen for folks. And I want to avoid that. I want you to avoid being late. I want you to avoid having to change something that's built with concrete because you didn't plan it on paper right.
Right.
How many people do you know that had to tear out stuff that they built because it wasn't done right the first time?
A lot of them.
A lot, right? And that's where you start to get in a world of pain because, I don't know, tearing something out and rebuilding it, that's a week. Yeah. Best case scenario, a week. And so now you've got a domino effect because that piece of the building or the you know, isn't built and it's late, and so there's a domino effect on everybody else. That
and the cost is more than double because you have to tear out whatever
you have to tear out, and you feel really bad as an entrepreneur. You just feel bad, right? And we don't want to feel bad. It's hard enough. Yeah. So, but there is kind of a race to the bottom right now, not just with consultants, but with everything.
Oh, with seeds, with everything, genetics.
Everything. It's just a race to the bottom.
But this too shall pass. I think all of this, you know, and you've been around long enough with the industry. So all this stuff, it's like it goes in waves. And it's a struggle now, and it's going to get better. And then it's probably going to be a struggle again, and it's going to get better.
Up and down, up and down, up and down. I mean, you know, it's kind of like life. But it's more extreme than life, right? With the ups and the downs. And yes, this moment too shall pass. Yeah. Will there be a race to the bottom, you know, for the foreseeable future in the cannabis industry? Probably, you know, because the frameworks are so screwed up with regulation and taxes that consumers are very price conscious, right? You know, and all the heavy consumers are underground because they can't afford it. Yeah. And so this is the problem. So of course people want to slash their prices to try to bring people in, right? And it can end badly, right? Because even if your margins are the same or get better because your inputs are cheaper, your cash flow is really much lower. Right? You have lower cash flow than you did before because you're selling something for 20 an eighth instead of 40 an eighth, or whatever the number is, right? And now, but you have the same amount of employees. Yeah. All right. And so the race to the bottom becomes a cash flow issue, and you can run out of cash. Right. Okay. And running out of cash is the biggest disaster for any entrepreneur. Yeah. Right. Because now you're in receivership or bankruptcy or whatever it is. And talk about painful, you know,
Yeah.
and if you did a personal guarantee, you might personally be bankrupt.
Mhm.
So, it's and you know, these horror stories are all over.
All over.
Are
Yeah.
just all over. There's thousands of these horror stories. So get some good advice, you know, even if it's not me, get really good advice.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. So if somebody's looking for you, they can find you on your website and
Yeah.
also on social media.
Yeah, AndrewDeAngelo.com is the website. Most of my social media is Andrew_DeAngelo, except LinkedIn, which is just Andrew DeAngelo. And there's lastprisonerproject.org also. And yeah, if anybody wants to help prisoners, check out lastprisonerproject.org. If anybody needs help from me, drop me an email or a social message.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a great show. I really appreciate it.
James, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks
have a
for
good
having me. All right, bro.
Cheers.